I asked to speak to you today because I saw a newspaper article about a talk that you had received from Archie Macdonald and his colleague, and I was concerned about some of the things that I saw in that article and then in the slides. So I wanted to come and speak to this issue because it's something that I've been working on for the last 30 years in all kinds of different situations. So I saw what they presented was the idea that today's forests are old and unhealthy. And these are slides that they showed you. I'm not quite sure when their talk was. I can't remember, but a little while back. And, you know, the idea that old forests are unhealthy, I was concerned with. And the goal is healthy forests, but that it looks like the picture on the right. So I was concerned with those ideas being presented to you as though they are a good representation of the science. And these are quotes from the newspaper article that reported on their talk. So obviously I didn't hear them, but they said this as well as providing too much fuel. Old forests offer less diversity and are susceptible to disease, pests, and drought. It's just not correct. And I don't have time here to go into the real details of that, but old forests are the cornerstone of biodiversity in British Columbia. British Columbia is unique in North America in terms of its biodiversity values. And the province of British Columbia, for the last 30 years, has recognized the key importance of managing and maintaining appropriate old growth on the landscape. And it is not a dying thing. It is the end of a succession. And in some of our ecosystems, it lasts for many thousands of years. And in other ecosystems, it develops differently. So I was really concerned about this and the next quote, which was 90% of our forests were not designed to become old growth. It's incorrect. There is of course, old forest in fire-maintained ecosystems. And I felt like these quotes really did a bad job of talking about ecosystems and how we need to do management. And I saw that there had been a call for science, so I thought I would bring some to the table today. So these two things are factually incorrect. And I am an ecologist. I've worked on many climate and vulnerability and resilience projects, and I've worked with the province and many nations for the last 30 years, and I can, that's my background. I don't have time to talk longer about that. Your area covers a vast array of different ecosystems types, from the open fire-maintained ecosystems that we would see around the Sycamus area. They're literally just, it took me 2 seconds to just pull off Google Earth some images. This is how we've managed this ecosystem with large, progressive, open clear cuts. And now, of course, over 40, 50 years, that has regenerated into large areas of single-aged forest, very different from the natural ecosystem. In the Revelstoke area, we would have inland rainforest. We have done the same thing there. We have managed through large clear cuts. I didn't pick out these areas. It's just what the world looks like if you look at Google Earth. And so in ecosystems that are extremely different, forest management has taken the same approach. And I was concerned because I didn't see in the previous talk by Archie Macdonald a desire to change how management happens. And that's really why I'm here today. So fire risk is increasing. We know this because of the climate crisis and because of how the landscape has been managed over time. So I work on climate change issues. We have to deal with greenhouse gas emissions. Otherwise, we are in serious trouble. There is no question that is true. There's no ceiling to the current amount of change that is happening. We are warming and drying. And that isn't predicted to stop at some point. That is going to continue into the future. And all the models show that much of the southern interior may not support trees. And we're not talking hundreds of years out. We're talking in our lifetimes. That is a real thing. Harvesting of trees and wildfires are together the largest emitters of carbon in British Columbia. So that is something that we need to get real about. So our historic approach to forestry has increased susceptibility to fire. It has removed deciduous from the understory in an attempt to increase timber supply. It normalizes and naturally diverse mosaic of forestry into large swaths of similar stands. And by clear cutting dries the ground and increases the immediate effects of climate change. And because your area spans very different ecosystems, the relative effects of these things are different. But these general approaches has had the same effect. It led to simplified and more and less resilient ecosystems by doing this. The science is on old growth. There is no evidence that old growth burns more often than other forest types. It burns in relation to its existence on the land base. So if there's a lot of old growth, it will burn. If there isn't, then it won't. It doesn't burn more often. There is evidence that old growth is less likely to catch on fire than managed forest. And there is no evidence that protected forests burn more. There's been a big push to say, oh, we can't have those protected areas, they're dangerous. It's just not true, and there's no science to support it. And if you think about it, it's old growth. If it has survived fire for 100, 200, 400, 1,000 fire seasons, it means it's likely to continue to do so going forwards. And of course, as we just said, the risk is increasing, but there is no evidence that old growth is making your landscapes more dangerous. The science on fires is that we think that we can run in there and manage this system, but we really can't. It only works, our forest management approach really only does anything in intermediate fire conditions. If it's going to burn, it's really going to burn. Primary forests, so natural forests that have not been managed, including old growth, do better in drought. And if we have this big range of forest types again, but if you think of all the root layers, if you think of a cool climate, the diversity, the shrub layers, it makes actual sense then if you walk into a dense clear cut. And intense plantation forestry, characterized by young forests, and that they're spatially all the same, they are significant drivers of wildfire. And there's lots of evidence to suggest that that is true. Walk into some old growth. If you can find some near you, walk into it in the forest in the summer. It can be up to 10 degrees cooler. In the Revelstoke areas, in those wetter forest types, this is particularly pronounced. But mosses and shrub layers and grasses, they all give you moisture retention, and that effect, that microclimate effect, staves off the immediate effects of climate change. We have logged all the old growth in most of the dry low elevation valleys. There's nothing left today. So but those ecosystems used to be naturally resilient to fires. They were large Douglas fir, ponderosa pine ecosystems, widely spaced, with natural resilience to fire, and we have completely moved away from that. So regrowing clear cuts provides very little value except for timber. They're hotter and drier and more uniform and more easily disturbed over time. Others are saying the same thing. The Forest Practices Board, which is the provincial watchdog that I used to be the vice chair of for 6 years, they said, I wasn't on the board at the time, they reduced this report last year. They said our historic management practices have led us in the wrong direction. The Old Growth Strategic Review Panel, which is Al Gawley and Gary Merkel, they also said the same thing. They wrote a very large report looking at how forest management has led us to the wrong place. And they talked about the need to change how we think about the forest, manage it differently. And that is central to work that is happening within the province and with many nations today to try to change the priorities for how we think about management of forests. So everyone agrees that change is needed. And there are some solutions here. We need to change how we do. We need to definitely, I think I would agree with Archie Macdonald and the others that we need to modify fire suppression policies. We need to think about that. We need to bring back in fire regimes and reduce some fuel loading in some ecosystems where it is ecologically appropriate. But we need to retain and restore old growth because it slows fires and it maintains ecosystem resilience. we need to not clear cut. For 30 years, the ecologists of the province have been saying we must move away from clear cutting. It simplifies the forest, it destroys ecosystem health, it allows the forest floor to dry out considerably quicker than a partial harvest or an old forest stand. And that, in the time of intense drought, which is what we are in, but is going to get worse, is what we need. We need to maintain moisture in the forest. We need to not clear cut because it leads to single age stands that at the landscape level are very vulnerable. And we have done all these things because we've removed all the deciduous species in the land base by adding glyphosate. All of these things have been about trying to maximize timber output without consideration of the broader set of values. And that is the change that is needed. That's what the Old Growth Strategic Review says, and that's where we need to go. Key messages: change is needed. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. We have to stop fighting nature and put back natural resilience. We need to focus management on the other values. Water and temperature are going to be the most important things going forward. I think you already know that. Biodiversity and structural diversity are key. And there is not one size fits all. We need a serious mindset, particularly in foresters. And I urge you to beware of words that sound the same but mean different things. Forest health is not ecosystem health. There's a focus in foresters to say we have to log this forest because there's a forest health issue. Well, forest health agents are natural and they give you ecosystem resilience over time. I know that I'm out of time, so I will stop. I added the 3 slides at the end because they give you some different information. This is an example. I just flew over this. This is what we must not do going forward. We need to recreate ecosystems that look like the one on the right. And that is a forest management issue. So I will stop. I put the last slides in if you want to look up more information.